Hello and welcome to the All Saints podcast. I'm here this week with Mrs. Candice Brandt and Mrs. Leah Douglas to talk about one of the most exciting educational initiatives that I've had the privilege of being involved in. You've seen in the last few weeks I've had one or two conversations, actually no, 3 or 4 conversations with Mr. Joshua Taylor of Grace Classical Christian Academy in Granbury. And it occurred to me that it would be a very sensible thing to hear from these two ladies about the Oaks Tutorials, which is a Christian... No, I'm going to let you guys describe it in a minute or two. We'll come to you in a second. I should just explain briefly how I got to be involved in this. We realised shortly before, actually, my family and I arrived here at All Saints, that there were all kinds of educational opportunities for young people at All Saints that we weren't exploiting, and I mused over these for a long time and never really thought there'd be any opportunity to do much about it. But Candice and Leah asked Pastor Neil and me to get involved in the school which they were starting, and one thing led to another, and basically what we did was to fit the Bible and theology classes that I was very excited about offering to all the young people here at All Saints into the curriculum at the Oaks Tutorials. Which I'm going to ask these guys about now. So basically, I got involved in this sort of sideways, doing double duty by teaching for the young people at All Saints and teaching a whole bunch of other young people I've never met, which has been an absolute blast. I've now done it for 2 academic years, and it's been wonderful. And so, ladies, thank you very much for being with us. What I'd like to do today is to talk with you about the Oaks Tutorials, and also about your own backgrounds as educators and as mothers. And so maybe we could start there. Do you want to just introduce yourselves briefly and tell us about your own upbringing, as much as you want to. You don't and also just tell us a little bit about how your convictions have been shaped concerning Christian education and your own educational experiences as teachers and so on and so forth. So if we start, Leah, maybe we start with you. Do you want to tell us a bit about yourself, your family, a bit about your background, what got you to this point?
Sure. I was homeschooled for several years, and then my parents saw what was going on in Moscow at Logos and wanted to do something similar for my brother and I. So my parents started a classical Christian school 5 days a week in Spokane, Washington, and my dad was a headmaster, so I got to see a lot of what goes on behind the scenes there, and I'm thankful for that.
And it didn't scare you off?
It didn't, apparently. Maybe I wasn't paying as close attention as I should have been. But so I graduated from there and went to a very small liberal arts college. And as our kids were getting older and approaching school age, we ended up doing a 5-day-a-week school for a few years, and then we ended up homeschooling for a year. And homeschooling, I realized that there was no way that I could ever give my kids as good as what I had received all by myself.
Right.
And even in a co-op, I didn't think 1 day a week was going to cut what I really wanted to give them. So, and Candice had approached a couple of years before that, asking if we would be interested in doing something like what we've got going at the Oaks now. And at that point, I wasn't interested, but finally we were
She's
interested.
persuasive, right, isn't she?
Yes, she is. And I trusted her. She's got a very good track record and lots of experience, and that's what I wanted. So.
Okay. Well, we're going to come in a minute to the shape of the Oaks Tutorials and what it is you're trying to do. Before that, Candice, Leah, you have 4 children.
Yes.
Age ranges?
4 to almost 12.
Okay, right. So you're in that first half of the project of motherhood.
Yes.
And teaching your kids. Okay. Candice, tell us about yourself and your family and your own educational background and experiences.
Well, I am a mother first, I guess, of 10 children, and their age ranges are 31 to 13. So,
right.
And we've homeschooled at least one of them in some form or another for
the whole of
that time. Yes.
Right.
So I started homeschooling not because I wanted to, actually kind of kicking and screaming as we were going overseas as missionaries, and it was either homeschool or boarding school, and we were convicted about our responsibility as parents and the education of our children enough at that point to decide that homeschooling was the only option for us. Right. And so that's how I got started in my homeschooling journey overseas, all alone, homeschooling our oldest two. And at that point we had 5 children. And so when we came back to the United States, we were looking for help in our homeschooling, and I did try some co-ops, and I tried different curriculum, thinking that would be what I needed, the magic bullet to make it easier, and kept finding that I was falling short. I wasn't able to do everything that I needed to do for all of my children, and the Lord was growing our family at that time, and so I was looking outside of myself, and so finding people in our church community who could come together with me to do something together to support each other. And so I started at that time as director of a classical conversations program, which was pretty new back in the day in North Carolina. I directed that for 8 years, and then as we went through our journey with classical conversations, we saw ways in which we wanted to go bigger and deeper and be more effective in supporting each other in our homeschooling. Right. So while along that time, my husband and I helped to start a Christian classical university style high school from which 2 of our children graduated and 1 went through a junior year before we moved to Texas, and also started tutorial programs that met 1 day a week in North Carolina for the grammar stage and the logic stage. Right. So they're still going strong back in North Carolina under the board of the high school, which is really exciting to see and to watch those families continue to grow. When we moved to Texas, we were looking for something to help support our homeschooling endeavors, and at that point I was pretty burned out.
Really?
And didn't think, both Sean and I joked about, you only have 1 school in you, and
it turns out you've got 2 or 3, right?
I don't never look for that, but the Lord sometimes just puts things in front of you and gives you no options. So we tried some different schools here that would help us, Christian classical schools that really ended up not being good fits. So we were missing something. Everything was missing something. And so we were trying to build community and find people to come alongside us for something like the Oaks. And it wasn't until the Douglases in 2020, the beginning of 2020, came along and said, we're ready now.
Yeah, you persuaded us.
Kind of all came together for what we have now at the Oaks. Right. And I think it was pretty amazing that the way that our vision seemed to really align. We're just been really blessed to have that unity as we've gone into the Oaks and building together.
So I want to ask you in a second to describe the Oaks as concisely and crisply as you can, and just like give people a kind of comprehensive sense of what it is you're trying to do. But even before we get to that, I'm struck by a couple of things, and the first is there's that sense of being convicted that you spoke about, Candice, in particular, and I think a lot of homeschooling parents will empathize with that. I recall that for Nicole and me, that we weren't looking to be convinced of anything. I was actually studying at seminary. We had our first child, Ben. I think number 2, Becky, was on the way. Maybe Abby was on the way. I can't remember. But we were at some stage in my theological training. And it was a theologically driven, biblically driven conviction that shifted in us, the desire to make our children's upbringing consistently biblical as much as we could, and realizing that the plan that we'd subconsciously formed up to that point, just to shunt our kids into the state education sector, wasn't a great way of doing that for us. In fact, it wasn't a great way of doing that, period. And we felt convicted that we wanted to try and do better, and we weren't at all sure what to do. And I think especially for mums, and I think of Nicole, my wife, I doubt there's a Christian educator, home educator watching this who hasn't had that kind of feeling of, oh my goodness, rabbit in headlights, what am I doing? I can't do this. But we have to try, because you don't want to settle for anything less than the best you can give for your children. And so minimally, you have to be striving to give them a Christian education of some kind. And then the other thing I'm struck by, and this, both of you, I guess, have been in this position of just wanting to do better than you feel able to. You get started, and you think, well, that's good. And then you think, if only we could, we're doing okay, but this isn't great, or that isn't great. We want to try and improve it. And I think that's something, I don't know whether everybody feels that. I think probably we all should. And I want to encourage home educating parents, especially mums, but actually dads as well. I've spoken to a few dads who felt this sense of, maybe what we're doing isn't as good as it could be. Well, no, it's not. It never will be as good as it could be. And you don't want to despair over that. But I want to say that there is a sense in which we all ought to be striving to do a better job this year than last year. And whether that leads you to a Christian school or a different kind of home education or classical conversations or whatever it is that the Oaks Tutorials is. I mean, I think I wouldn't want to be black and white about what precisely you choose, but it's as well to be clear about the pros and cons of the different options, right? And to try to be getting more faithful, more mature, more wise, more consistent in our teaching. And so that leads me then to ask the crunch question. So can you describe what it is you're doing? I don't know which one of you wants to do this. What is the Oaks Tutorials? What are its distinctive aims and features as a school?
You want to start?
We were going to have this problem the whole time.
Yeah.
So I need to tell you what was.
That's okay.
Go on, Leah, tell us first up, and then Candice pitch in and go ahead.
Okay, so we call it the 3 C's. We're Christian first, then classical, and collaborative. So Christian, not meaning we just slap a Bible class on at the beginning, but that we want everything integrated into Scripture. We want kids to see different subjects the way God sees them, which is not even as different subjects in the first place. So Christian in the first place, and then classical, which we actually feel like is just a subset of Christian. Priest, king, prophet, grammar, logic, rhetoric, knowledge, understanding, wisdom. It all, that pattern is definitely something that's built into the world, and it's definitely built into our kids. So using that pattern to do what the kids are actually really enjoying, and Pastor Neil uses the word wonder all the time, capturing that wonder and working with it, not against it. And then collaborative, meaning we want to work with parents. And a lot of schools will say that they're doing that, and I think that they are, but I think that we just have to work very closely with parents. And we will live or die by how well we work with parents. So our teachers are coming up with the plan for the week and what the kids are going to do at home. And as a parent, you just have to follow through with that on those home days. But so it's very important that we're on the same page with our parents and have them understanding what we're doing and why we're doing it the way we're doing it, so they can embrace that.
So fill in some of those details for us then, Candice. So it's Christian, right? It's classical, and in one of the podcasts I did with Josh Taylor, we talked about what you just mentioned, the biblical background to what has come to be known as the classical Christian model. And I think even if you're not self-consciously embracing that as an educator, there are features of it which necessarily find their way into the way you do things. So let's not go down that rabbit trail any further, because I have to discipline myself.
That's good.
But the collaborative thing, Candice, talk to us about the structure of a week at the Oaks, an average, if there's such a thing, and a normal week at the Oaks. What do you do that makes it distinctively collaborative?
We meet on Mondays and Thursdays, and so it is a drop-off program. Parents are welcome to stay for as much or as they'd like of any of the days, but we start in the morning with an assembly, and we go through the class day, and every subject that the students have in their academic plan are covered on our class days. And then on their home days, on Tuesday and Wednesday, they take a syllabus home that walks parents through exactly what they need to do at home for each of those days. And then they come back to class day on Thursday. Whether it was reading to prepare for class discussion, which with the older students, a lot of that, those home days are in preparation for the class day, for good discussion and practicing their rhetorical skills. But there are our Fridays, then we consider a Scole Friday, and we want to allow for a lighter academic load at home, and giving parents freedom to teach their kids other things, whether it's music lessons, baking, shop, whatever it is that they need to do to give them a well-rounded education. That's Scole Friday. So they may have some reading assignments, they may have a little bit of leftover math. The older kids may have a little bit of extra theology.
Maybe, just a little bit.
But we don't want to overload the weekends. We want Sunday to be sacred, set aside. We don't want kids cramming for Monday. We want everything done, before then. So that's what the home days look like. Now, depending on the student, of course, how much time they have to put in to accomplish the work varies. But
see, because this is the thing that intrigues me about it. If you think of a spectrum of educational structures, a lot of Christian educators, certainly we did, Nicole and I, started out with homeschooling because that's all we could afford and it's all that was available. And you mentioned a co-op. We actually did that a little bit with one or two other families, found that immensely helpful. But basically, the structure was shaped by us, and the co-op only lasted for as long as we were in that location. And so a couple of years passed and we were no longer doing that. And so we're basically on our own. And then at the other end of the spectrum, you've got the standard sort of Christian school model, 8 till 4 or whatever. You call it the drop-off model. I've never heard that phrase, but you take your kids to school and they get basically all the stuff. It's provided, and they've probably got homework to do. But in the middle there, you have the Oaks tutorials, where if you were wanting to plug this and argue for it, you're saying something like it has the benefits of a structure provided by educators who are full-time, or at least most of their time vocational specialists actually in their subjects, that gives the structure that a lot of homeschoolers struggle with. I mean, we didn't know where to turn for that structure, and we grabbed some stuff which was mostly great, though some of it was terrible and we had to ditch it. But on the other hand, you've got the benefits of parental involvement that's absolutely core to the program. It's not like mum and dad need to just make sure that little Johnny's doing his homework. They're actually involved in the teaching, and those Fridays give that flexibility of, if you've got a parent who wants their child to learn a couple of subjects that aren't being done, they can teach them. If you've got a setting where you want the parents just want their children to have more practical skills or work in the family business, they can do that. So what am I missing? I mean, are there other aspects of this that over the couple of years you've been doing it have really stood out to you as real benefits of the program, particularly maybe on those days when you're all together? What's really worked well that you've really loved? Leah, talk to us about that.
Well, I love what you were just saying. It's just a continuation of that. That balance between getting time in the classroom, time with kids their age, time with a different teacher. So as a parent, I'm getting that support. I want you to do better with your handwriting, and it's not just me saying that. It's not just me and Dad saying that. Miss so-and-so says so too. Yes. And I think that can be really, really helpful for young boys, for instance.
Well, and just pause on that, because for boys, we've people who know us know we've got one son and 2 daughters. Our son is the oldest, and so we were conscious from a very early age that he's being raised in a highly feminized environment, and he loves his sisters and he loves his mum and they all love him. He drives them nuts sometimes, doesn't he? Anyway, but it's wonderful in lots of ways, especially when he's young. But you get to 12, 13, 14, and it's not a great environment for a kid to be in the whole time. And I've been struck by that benefit here at the Oaks, and actually there are other ways of introducing that.
Yeah.
But so for boys especially,
and the girls get the social aspect
Right,
that
yeah.
they also really need.
right, and those relationships, learning to get on with people that you don't always get on with, making new friends who you really do get on with.
And blind spots. I mean, because you can
Right.
get in your own little bubble,
Mhm.
and you might be really good at what you're really good at, but you might not know what issues maybe you struggle with because there's just nothing to bring
Right.
them up.
Unknown unknowns.
So, yeah.
And that goes with character issues in your children. Sometimes when you're doing things in community, you get rubbed up against people, and you're going to then
Yeah,
see sin maybe that wasn't obvious to you as a parent, which I find has been very helpful to us. It's painful, of course,
Yeah.
but it's and
Yeah.
humbling, but
Yeah.
it's also very helpful.
Yes.
And for having so many sons, knowing
How many sons do you have?
seven
Right,
sons.
7 sons.
Knowing the transition of parenting that you have to walk through as a mother, and learning that we're so needy and dependent on other inputs in our children's lives.
Yes,
I
yes.
think it's wonderful to have a good relationship. I have a good relationship with all of my sons, and I'm very, very thankful for that. But I think having outside input has been a good, healthy part of that.
Yes. And it's interesting you say you sometimes don't see it until you don't see what you're lacking until it's provided. And I've noticed that even we have a comparatively small family, like I said, 3 kids, and then just occasionally I'll see one of the children or all of them in a different social environment, really thriving and really having a wonderful time. I think like back in the UK, Ben joined the Royal Air Force Cadets and just developed a whole bunch of character traits that he hadn't had the opportunity to develop elsewhere. And now there were some problems with that environment, some fairly predictable ones, and it was obvious to us all the way along that there were significant benefits to having some kind of community in educational contexts. And it's not just for reasons that you can see, it's for all the reasons you can't see. And those are almost, as a parent, they're the more important ones, because you can fix the problems that you can spot.
Yeah.
But we all, do you have this? You like family quirks? and you sort of suddenly realise that all your children have Jeffrey family traits. And like, oh my goodness, how do we get rid of these? And the answer is by exposing them to some other families. So talk about the classroom setting specifically then. What's the, I mean, I know the answer to this because you've asked me, and we've talked about how I teach the Bible and theology classes, and but talk to the listeners about what you're trying to get the teachers to do and what they're doing successfully that really creates the classroom environment that you're looking for.
You want to speak to the lower grades, and I'll speak to the rhetoric school? Because I
Yeah, go
think there
ahead.
is some difference
Right.
in what we're doing.
So with the lower grades then, Leah, what are the teachers trying to accomplish in the classroom?
So definitely, well, like we talked about before, that joy and working with the grain. So what are they really good at? This is going to go back to classical.
Yes,
They're really
yes,
good
yes.
at the chants and the jingles and things that rhyme and have a rhythm to them, and using their bodies and being outside. So that's all classical. And I don't...
Liturgies.
Yes, liturgies. Thank you. Good. Definitely purposefully building in structure into our days that is very reliable, and the kids thrive on that. And we as adults might think that looks boring and dry.
Yeah,
But they love knowing what comes next.
Yeah.
They love knowing what to say. When teacher says this, we say this. And they just really thrive that way. And yeah, that joy is everything.
And I've noticed that you talk about the songs. I mean, I'm on the same corridor here, and my afternoons at about 3:45 p.m. are punctuated by the strains of a song that you all sing at the end of the day. Just kind of flow. It's just wonderful we're shaped by those habits, especially as young children. We don't realise. Older grades, Candice.
So We want to focus on discussion and learning through discussion, learning from each other in class discussion. I think that's one of the real strengths of having that class time. While the teacher's leading, the students are coming prepared and ready to talk, and that way they can go deeper into their subjects, and that camaraderie and also the challenge of their peers. There's something that happens in that time in the classroom when they're not just reading a book on their own and thinking about it on their own, but then they're hearing someone's completely different perspective on what they read, which is hard to find in just your isolated homeschool setting. I can see it completely shaping our high schoolers and the way that they think and the way that they approach what they read, and particularly your theology classes. I'm going to put a little plug in there.
You plug away, go ahead. Well, it's interesting you mentioned that, because at their best, those are truly eye-opening to me. I mean, like, I don't know whether students realize this, but teachers learn things from their classes when the classes are going well. And that's not just that doesn't mean that we're underprepared. It means that you're getting something from the sum of the parts of this community, where everyone is working hard. Like, who says that a 16-year-old can't teach their pastor? Like, that, of course they can. But all of that. Sorry, I'm about to ask you something else. Were you about to say?
No, it's okay.
Right, because what I wanted to ask you about was the implications of that requirement for collaboration between the home and the school. So here's the thing: like, if you're homeschooling, parents, you get to do whatever you like, and nobody's going to complain. If you're sending your kids to a school, you're 100% bought into it, and presumably you pick that school because you're willing to, in effect, delegate at quite a high level everything to the school. Now, you could always pull your kid out if you didn't like it, but the peculiar challenge and opportunity that you guys have embraced is that you've got an ongoing need for collaboration, which is going to have tremendous strengths. It seems to me obvious that you're using everybody's gifts in an ongoing way, and yet it's going to pose challenges. Because a parent who doesn't really want to be involved or invested or enthusiastic or committed to helping their kids, like, they're going to struggle at the Oaks, correct?
Yep. Primarily in the grammar stage, I would say, when they definitely need the parents more hands-on.
Yes.
We're hoping to grow our students in more and more independence, obviously, through the logic stage and the rhetorical stage. That they're going to be doing more and more on their own. I'd like to circle back to something about that collaborative model that's really important, that we talk to parents when we bring them into their family interview. One of the things that we want them to understand is that we are not in any way usurping their authority in the home, their responsibility to educate their children. What we're doing is we're offering them tools to help them along as they do the task of educating their kids. And we are in a partnership for the discipleship of their kids. So the things that we're doing at the Oaks have the aim of heart molding and shaping, just like the parents want for their children to love God and to love the things that God loves. That's what we're aiming for with them. So
no, I like that, and it's one of the things I've said actually about the Bible and theology classes in particular, even for people whose kids aren't at the Oaks. Like, I love it when parents come in to the classes. I don't feel like, oh, good, do you not trust me, or like intruded upon. It's actually really profoundly helpful for parents to be there occasionally or even regularly, because it encourages that sense of, it's not quite delegation, it's partnership, which is the real strength of this kind of model. Talk to me about curriculum choices. What sort of have you had particular priorities in choosing curricula, or have there been particular things that you've encountered that have worked really well? What kind of things have you worked through?
We're really happy with everything the way it is right now. So.
Right.
No, I think that's one of the issues that you run into a little bit of conflict with families who are homeschooling and who are used to making all the decisions for their own families. where when we do make a curriculum choice, it's not always exactly what the other family might choose. And we like to tell our parents that there is no perfect curriculum. We don't believe that you can find something absolutely perfect in every way. And so we try to make a choice for our curriculum in something that will be the best that we believe our teachers can make it. And so it is dependent upon a really good teacher to make any curriculum good. We believe it's key to have the right kind of teacher, and then it's also necessary for parents, if they have issues with a curriculum, then they're involved, they're paying attention, and they're guiding the conversations at home so that the students get from the text what the parents want them to learn. So we're not doing this in a vacuum, and we expect parents to be involved, and if there is something they don't like, then we want to know, but we also want to make sure that they understand that we teach around the things that aren't perfect.
No, it's interesting because that's in a sense it mirrors the kinds of discussions we have sometimes in theology classes. So I don't think there's a theology book in the world that any informed reader would agree with everything about. And so then if you complicate matters further by giving a book as a set text to a class, if you really think that all the students, never mind all their parents, are going to be happy with everything that Calvin says on everything, or everything that Barving says on everything, it's like, just think again. I mean, that's totally unrealistic. And so your education at that point, what you're aiming to do is to teach the young people to work through how do you engage critically but constructively with something that you don't agree with. And it becomes particularly intriguing when you've got texture within the class, and this goes back to the benefit of collaborative teaching and learning, that you have the ability to help kids and young adults to work through issues of conscientious disagreement. And if you were doing just homeschooling, like we did for so many years, you don't even notice that you don't have that opportunity. Because heck, mum just teaches you everything. And on the odd occasion that mum finds something in the book, or dad finds something in the book that he disagrees with, then he just says, well, this is wrong and here's why. And kids are like, well, okay. Or maybe they disagree with dad, but what you haven't got is the opportunity to help young people to work out how to have a constructive, healthy debate about a difficult or controversial topic. And I love the fact that especially perhaps the older theology students, we get that opportunity, and we had one or two at the end of the semester that's just finished, and it was kind of interesting just to see how the young adults really responded. Okay, so I mean, there's tons more we could talk about, but you guys are busy, and I want to know: are there any other final thoughts that you have? We've been talking for a while. Things that you'd want to share with listeners and viewers about what you're trying to do, things that you really are excited about, things that you'd want people to consider as they're thinking about their own children's education, whatever route they're taking. Let me start with Leah. Any final thoughts on any of these topics?
Well, one thing that's coming to mind is music, and singing in a choir is also something that's pretty hard to do at home with just your family. But I think that it's really important. I think there's a lot of theological lessons to learn by singing with a body of people, and music. I mean, we call music God's language, and I just think there's a lot to be learned there, and really, really excited about our music program, and hopeful that we can get a lot of participation in our music program, because it needs people. It really needs people.
Because that's interesting. That our kids arrived here just a little late, and having done too many of the wrong things to fit with the curriculum at the Oaks. Maybe we haven't.
Wrong things.
Anyway, but one thing that we did do, apart from the Bible and theology classes, which at various points one or more of our kids have come into, our youngest, Abby, has come along and done the choir and has just loved it. And she was in the end of term concert. And that, again, is just something it's quite hard to do if you're entirely focused in the home. So yeah, Candice.
I would just say that I have loved seeing the gifts of the body working together to make something like the Oaks. And that's one of the reasons why we have always pursued working with other people to help educate our kids whenever we could, is because I know that I'm limited and I have certain gifts and I'm thankful for them, but I certainly don't have all the gifts I need to do all the educating of my kids the way that they need to be educated. And that's one of the things I love about what we're doing, and just getting excited when I see somebody else's gifts being applied in the lives of my kids and really making a difference. And
Great.
So, yeah, I think that's...
Like it. Wonderful. All right. I think I'm going to let these busy ladies go about their day's work. We've talked today and over the last few weeks about a whole range of different educational possibilities. We've talked about schools, we've talked about homeschooling, we've talked about this collaborative 2 days a week model that the Oaks Tutorials embraces. I want to leave all of you who are parents of children in education with just one final thought, and it's this. You won't be able to choose all of the models for educating your children that we've talked about in the last month or so. You couldn't possibly do so. They can't all be done at the same time. But I hope that as you've listened today, and as you've listened over the last few weeks, and I would urge you, if you haven't heard them, go back and check out those conversations with Josh Taylor. As you've listened over the last few weeks, if you're honest, and I know I've felt this, you will have had moments where you thought, yeah, here is something that we're not doing as well as we could be. Now, I don't know what that will be for you as a parent and as an educator, but I can almost guarantee that for all of you, there'll be multiple factors like that could be improved. And whatever route you take to trying to make your children's education better next year than it was last year, I encourage you to find something. If you're not sure what to do, then come and chat to Pastor Neil or chat to me, and let's have a conversation about what it is about your kids' schooling that you'd like to shape. I strongly suspect that Candice and Leah would be very happy to talk to you, not just about the Oaks, although I'm sure they would, but just with their experience of educating children, so that whatever we're doing, and we're all in different circumstances, we'll all be doing different things, we can all be helping each other to get better at this greatest and most wonderful of tasks, the privilege of raising and educating our children. I think that'll do from us. Thank you, ladies, for joining us. Really appreciate your time. Lord bless you all, and look forward to seeing you very soon. God bless. Bye for now.